and our generation beyond. Got it. So before we introduce her, we will start with a beautiful video.
Giving new life to the broken young fragments that are joining them with the open mind, perfect expression, so many fuse together unparalleled histories into single narratives. I connect traditional Babylonian forms with street murals. Enrich photographs with black background painting. But on a deeper level, we connected our present day world to the trauma of my ancestors. We removed from shattered dreams. We heal by calling on the golden light of our ancestors for strength. Piece us together in long ago embraces, resistance, love letters, and collective care. We heal by fiercely holding and reclaiming golden harmony of our culture and language. Bind us together with sacred pines, all the ancient bells, and the worship of the natural within. We heal.
How can I help you? Hey, Larry, this is Pavin Ibet. One of my students, and Leslie, they're having an event, Erin Shigaki, the artist. They're in D106 and the sound isn't working.
Okay, I'll see if I can get Pablo to check it out.
D106, there's a whole bunch of students there too.
Okay.
Thank you, bye.
Please help to build this country in which humanity built in the present. Do we have a responsibility to reconnect these stories? To not only have really broken pieces, but also to understand the way Black and youth stories in this country run parallel through generations. We see the healing we've received in the golden light of your ancestors. Held together in long ago places, fierce resistance, little lives, and collective care. We see the healing we received, unfolding and reclaiming the golden light of your ancestors. Together, and flies sacred sankofa and the mouths and ears of protective coward shells. We know the healing that comes with golden words of clear apology, acknowledgement, and reparation. You too should be made free when together we fight for unity. This is an invitation to deeply contemplate and connect our stories and struggles to those our Black siblings continue to face within our broken system. It is a call for Japanese Americans to use our moral authority to demand familiar offerings, reparations, and a culture of community care. In this work, I want to build a necessary and precious solidarity. We belong here to each other, beloved and whole.
So please join me and welcome Erin Shigaki.
Oh. Hi, everybody. Thanks for the people.
はい、
who
皆
are
さん、こんにち
here.
は。
Uh-oh.
私はジョイデンですね。はじめまして。
はじめまして、ジェイデン。日本語できますか？
私、はい、元気です。
Can you do the full, can you mute everybody?
はい。How do you say I'm mute in Japanese?
I'll send them a message. Because they seem to unmute sometimes.
Yeah. Zoom in. All right, should I try again?
Yes.
Okay, hi, everybody. Hopefully my volume's all right. I have kind of a raspy voice. I am gonna sort of give a broad overview of my work and talk about the things that happened on this campus in particular, and part of the talk. So I feel, please ask me questions about the film or any of the other work that you see afterward. There's going to be plenty of time for that. And I don't like to give the kind of artist talk where I'm like, and this one is about, and I use red paint. I would kind of rather speak about my my broad inspirations and goals, and then just show examples. So just sit back and listen and watch the screen. Don't look at me. I'm just going to read my thing. And I hope to get a bunch of good questions afterward. So, ooh, you know what? I'm gonna my glasses on. All right. So my work is about my family. And like most other American families, they are immigrants. My great-grandparents were trying to escape poverty in Japan and came first to the sugarcane plantations of Hawaii and then to the Seattle area around 1900. The city side landed in Seattle's central district and the countryside in the White River Valley of Auburn. During World War II, when the US declared war on Japan, everything that my family had built over 40 years was dismissed and swiftly taken. All people of Japanese ancestry on the West Coast were forcibly removed and mass incarcerated based on the color of their skin, without regard to citizenship and constitutional promises therein, without regard to what they built for the American machine and dream. 125,274 persons of Japanese ancestry were rounded up. To help you imagine the scale of that number, 125,274, that is just slightly fewer than the population of the city of Bellevue today. So, you can just take a visual of the city of Bellevue being emptied out. My work is about America's echoing infatuation with criminalizing and jailing Black and brown bodies. The lies that US media and the government spread about Japanese Americans being dangerous spies, and also the slightly softer narrative for more liberal people that a mass roundup was safer for the Japanese Americans, are both notions that have stayed in the American understanding of this event to this day. You know how it works, probably way more potently today, The media hammers people with its messages, whether true or false. And not everyone can or wants to separate the truths from the lies. The government knows this. There were plenty of people who knew that the Japanese incarceration was not a constitutional or humane move, but media-induced mass hysteria won out. I want to tell you what I know about this dark period of US history. And I know because my grandmother's
You're muted.
We cannot hear.
You're muted.
Oh. Thank you. In the camps, the housing was poor quality and full of gaps that let in the dust, cold, and insects. There were shared bathrooms with little privacy. A lot of the fathers were missing because they had been taken earlier and jailed in other prisons by the FBI in order to separate families and weaken the community's structure. Oops. The food was army issue slop, and there were many outbreaks of food poisoning. People died in childbirth and from other inadequate health care. People were murdered by guards. People received no mental health care in a place where there was a constant weight of collective depression, fear, and uncertainty. There were guard towers and barbed wire. They were concentration camps. What else do I know about the camps? We turned to the most American of pastimes to save us. Here's a photo of baseball team, one of many baseball teams. And we took over the kitchens. We turned crap land into fertile farmland so that there would be fresh vegetables. Here's a picture of my family. We made sure there was schooling and entertainment for the kids. We fell in love. We had babies. We created amazing furniture and art out of scraps. We danced, we sang, we returned to Japanese culture, even though our very Japaneseness was the supposed reason we were jailed. We resisted in ways large and small. We laid to rest our sons who died in segregated units in Europe. Most of us survived. We did what other communities of color have always done from the first people onward. We looked after each other and knew that collective care was the only way that our children and those of us to come would make it. My work is about my family's return to Seattle and a Japantown, which is today's Chinatown International District, forever changed. Their return and rebuilding provided me a place to grow up, loved and protected, despite all of the trauma that happened in those concentration camps. I went to college on the East Coast and I stayed in Brooklyn for many years, so I felt unsure about my own homecoming to Seattle. But I was blessed to have a vibrant collective of people to come home to. I brought my parents on our first pilgrimage back to Minidoka, the concentration camp where my father had been born. He was delivered by a horse veterinarian because there were no doctors on hand when he was ready to come out, and where my mother's parents met and married. And then when I began to understand what exactly public art is, I realized what my purpose is, and I returned to it again and again. My North Star is to tell the Japanese American story in memory of my ancestors and in service of the liberation of all people. My work is about helping to heal the traumas of my community, including my own trauma that was passed down intergenerationally. My work is about placekeeping and expressing ourselves in our historic neighborhoods or wherever we decide to live. My work is about replacing cultural fabric in the face of mass development and displacement. My work is about telling truths. My work is about linking my own community's story to that of other communities of color, because we've been held apart by supremacy for too long, fighting each other for the same resources. Can we repair the wounds within our own communities and then reach further to the full beloved community? My work is about opening up spaces for conversations about all of these things and more, and returning to them as many times as needed. And so I returned to Bellevue College, a place where my community's erased history was literally whited out by a college administrator nearly 3 years ago, right before the pandemic arrived. I was invited here by API's faculty to put up a wheat paste mural in the same style that I'd done before. We chose an image of 2 frightened young Japanese children right before being put into a concentration camp. The slogan, "Never Again is Now," has been embraced by both the Japanese American and Jewish American communities to reference World War II atrocities and the ways that history continues to rhyme on the southern border and in the carceral state. Because I was asked to install this mural in Bellevue, I included specific local history in my text panel. You may not know that back then Bellevue was basically an agricultural suburb of Seattle. Japanese immigrants and their children did the backbreaking and dangerous work of clearing the land to make Bellevue suitable for farming and homes. Knowing this history, I also talk about how the Japanese Americans were dispossessed of their land when World War II began. I've already shown you images about how wartime hysteria was boosted in part by the media. And in our very own corner of the world in Bellevue, there was one extremely anti-Japanese figure, and his name was Miller Freeman. Miller Freeman was an anti-Asian racist who published his views in a newspaper that he owned. He founded the Anti-Japanese League of Washington in 1916 and was a vocal proponent for the state's 1921 alien land laws, which barred non-white immigrants from buying, owning, or leasing land in the state. He was a vocal proponent of the 1924 Immigration Act, which limited the number of immigrants allowed entry into the US through a national origins quota. And he was a vocal proponent of the 1942 incarceration of Japanese Americans. He championed these causes because he saw Japanese Americans as a threat to white prosperity. Like my family, the Freemans have also lived in the Seattle area for generations. However, instead of suffering the trauma of incarceration, they appear to have benefited from it. The current head of family was a former state representative who now runs the real estate development company that owns Bellevue Square and a significant swath of downtown Bellevue. Properties built on the very land taken first from indigenous people, then stripped from Japanese Americans in 1942. The Freeman family continues to hold a great deal of influence in Bellevue. The United States history of racism should not be erased or modified just because some find it difficult to come to terms with, or because it names people whose intergenerational wealth and power is entwined with that racism. In fact, it is this constant desire to whitewash the past that dooms us to repeat it. 3 generations later, the cruel and thoughtless attempt to silence my art stirred up the same emotions my ancestors felt, but were unable to speak of in order to survive their incarceration. Sorrow, anger, confusion, mistrust, dismissal, disrespect, shame, and self-hate. However tempting it is, I am not a person that's into cancel culture. I believe that human beings and this country are complicated and deserve a chance to make amends when they have made mistakes. The Freeman family of today isn't Miller Freeman, but isn't there anyone in the Freeman family who wants to disavow and repair the damage caused by their relative, Miller Freeman? I have not spoken to anyone. I am here back on the Bellevue College campus, where protecting the feelings of one white family was deemed more important than the mass imprisonment of a whole people. After the defacement, Bellevue College's Asian Pacific Islander faculty, students, and their allies stood up and forced the college administration to act. And for that, I am forever grateful. The board of the college wanted to control the narrative, but the Japanese American community swiftly gathered and we created our own ceremony. It was powerful and offered a measure of healing. When I looked out onto the sea of faces who had gathered to honor our story, our ancestors, I felt the support that our families wanted during World War II. But the thing most people still say to me about the defacement that happened here at BC is, I sure am glad she was fired, and him too, the president. And to me, that just misses the point. Were their firings just symbolic? What in the campus and city of Bellevue culture allowed them to think that this was okay? Has it been addressed? How do you feel about equity on this campus? These are questions that I leave for you all to discuss and interrogate. And here are a few more questions for you all. Whose stories are missing? How do you want to tell them? What narratives do you want to change? What kind of ancestors do you want to be? And what is your North Star? My North Star is to tell the Japanese American story in memory of my ancestors and in service of the liberation of all people. Thank you. Please take care of each other. You're going to monitor the chat?
Yeah.
Questions in the room?
So I do respect you, and I agree that if we want to heal, we have to look at the wounds that we have made in the past, or we have currently. But to many people, it might still be painful. It's hard to look into it. It's hard to face it again. So is there anything that you might have done that helps you face that all this pain that we will be still be feeling.
Yeah, Sunny asked a question about kind of, I guess, not being overtaken by the pain and the trauma, right? Well, I think you probably saw in my work and hopefully understood in my words that it is kind of a balancing act, you know, like I want to go there and look at the hard places and really help my community and myself find healing. And one of the ways that I do that is to make sure that I'm also spending a lot of time looking at the beautiful things that we are, that we always have been, that no one can take away from us, that we even created in those camps. You know what I mentioned, like, yeah, people kept having sex and romance in those camps, you know, people made art, people found ways to stay as sane as they could, and that's beautiful. You know, that there was this beautiful forward thinking mindset by most of the folks in that camp to like think about the children and the next generations to come. So I think that's the main thing. That's a great question. Thank you.
What helped you through your project, your project to keep going, to raise your attention and your fight to like promote more about this experience for other people to know about it? What helped you develop that?
You mean like after what happened at Bell? Well, I have to say, I mean, as much sleep as I lost, as painful as it was, it further fueled my fire, you know. I think it made me more radical. You know, and I want to say, like, this was the second time I was censored in Bellevue. The first time was covered up by the city of Bellevue. It was successfully covered up, you know? And so that's why when I was invited here to campus, I was like, okay, I'm going to try again. And it kind of just fell right into our laps, so to speak. Yeah, so I guess that's the silver lining. It's a great question. The silver lining is it's just kept me going, kept the fuel going.
I have a question for you said something about the first coming up with goes from Bellevue. What was the first one and what happened?
The first, I don't know if you remember the images of that sort of trophy figure where I was standing with my dad. I can flip back to it. Anyway, I just, I did these two pieces that I was invited to make about Bellevue. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to make them about the Japanese American community of Bellevue because those are my people. And I knew that there had been this figure in Bellevue. So I started to research and I used the same language. Like I called out that family in my artist panel that was supposed to go up. And they just didn't print it. And then they were like, oh, no, oh, sorry. Well, I don't know why did that happen? Like there was just a lot of back and forth. And then, calls off the record about, we're not supposed to use his name. Just a lot of real fishy stuff. And then I had many meetings with the city manager and just nothing was ever resolved. And there were two other people who were also censored in that show. One for also trying to call out Miller Freeman and one for just talking about anti-Asian racism on the streets of Bellevue. So it was quite enlightening.
There's a question in the chat. What can we do to fight the mean laws that are popping up to silence the truth if it makes a certain demographic uncomfortable?
I mean, I think we can all be involved, in protesting these things. I think there are lots of ways to do it, whether it's like, at City Hall or going into our representatives' offices or just writing campaigns. But I think one thing that we can do is when we see something happening, just bring it to light, you know, in social media or just doing a little more research about it. Yeah, I think we're in a really dangerous moment where we stand to lose a lot of ground regarding our civil liberties. And I hope that you all will really take up the mantle because it's your world, you know, it's your world. You're about to go into the adult workforce, right? So there's some things that you gotta keep mind of.
Another question in chat. Do you think the same thing would happen today if there was a World War III?
That's a great question. You know, we've seen plenty of echoes of this same thing. Right after 9/11, there were a lot of people who were wanting to like talk about rounding up Muslim Americans. I mean, I just don't think it's that far outside of the imagination of the people, actually. I would hope that there are enough of us that would, you know, stand up and put our collective feet down like we did after 9/11. But yeah, I guess it makes me a little nervous. And, you know, we don't even necessarily have to talk about World War III. Like, let's talk about what's going on with all this migrant detention and the continuing carceral state, you know, that we are like the richest country in the world with the most, you know, imprisoned people and mostly Black and brown folks. I mean, it's like, it's embarrassing. So I guess I think it is still going on.
Are you hopeful? And how do you maintain hope?
Great question. She asked if I'm hopeful. I think I am. I think I'm hopeful, you know, to be in this room looking at you all. I feel great about being able to do the work I'm doing, that it's having, I think, some measure of impact. But it's also hard. I mean, it's very heavy work. And I just need to, you know, put in the time to keep balanced, make sure I'm laughing a lot. I probably seem like a really serious person from that talk, but my friends know that I can be quite a goofball as well. And so it's all about holding both things, I think.
There's a hand up in the chat. Barry, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, you mentioned about cancel culture. Would you agree like it's on like would you say like it's on both sides of the political spectrum in regards to like especially like discrimination and stuff? Basic contact?
Yeah, Jerry, can you type that in chat? It's not coming out very clearly.
All right.
Because you're being piped into the whole room, so it's weird.
All right.
Okay, so we do have the question that they're especially interested in your work with Black and Indigenous communities. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I want to work to, as you saw in the film and some of my other pieces, just to talk about the ways that our stories are super parallel, you know, and I think the US government, or maybe I'll just say supremacy, does not want us to understand how similar they are. So, you know, I want to speak from my point of moral authority, and that's really only as a Japanese American, but I would like to draw the comparisons, and I love to collaborate with, other artists of color who are down to talk about how these stories really rhyme. There was a mural that I just finished recently that is about how almost spot on the farming story is between Japanese Americans and Mexican Americans. I mean, these populations stayed in some of the same housing, like Mexican American farmers stayed in some of the concentration camp barracks in the years after the war. So just things repeat over and over again. And I think we are a better people when we really see it, when we see those intersections. I think the word intersectionality has started to be used a lot, maybe too much, but it's real.
Jerry's question, you mentioned about cancel culture in your presentation. Would you say that's an issue on both sides of the political spectrum?
I think it is. I mean, even I would just say, I find cancel culture to be kind of a weird quirk of humanity at the moment, not even like putting it on any political party. Like, it's ridiculous that we can't make mistakes and then, become better people, like admit mistakes, and do the right thing. I think we all need to have room for that. I think you can go too far, and then maybe you get canceled. But just like the cultural phenomenon of like one bad thing and you're just forever off. Like I don't think I'm down with that.
Yep. What is your favorite art piece that you made?
Ooh, thank you. That's a fun question. I love so many of my pieces. That's why I show so many of them in my show. Well, the two paintings from the film, I kind of made into a bigger piece that's at the Wing-Luke Museum right now in a show about Japanese American resistance through time. And I really love how I expanded those two paintings into more of an altar, and I added ceramics, and then I was able to show the film. So that's sort of the one that I am really most proud of at the moment. And it's nice that it's like in this really special museum and that people are going to get to see it, and that I didn't have to build it for an outdoor space, even though, like, by the way, I want to know who's been maintaining the mural. I want to thank whoever has been doing that all these years.
It's magical.
That's crazy. I was like, I need to give that person a hug today when I come back onto campus. But thank you for that question. But I encourage all of you to go to that show at the Wing-Luke Museum if you're ever in town. It has a bunch of great art in it.
You learned about your story. Did you go back to Japan to learn about your story, or you learned about Japanese story?
Oh, I love that question. I've been to Japan a couple of times, but yeah, I'm fourth generation American. So I speak way more Japanese than my parents, for example. And it's a big question, like, oh, do I get to be Japanese? What's the difference between Japanese and Japanese American, or, what's the middle ground? And I want to spend more time there. I would love to be able to speak better. And as you saw, I definitely am trying, to lean into the the culture and pick up ideas from what is my motherland or one of my motherlands, I guess. So yeah, it's a great question for those of us, which is most of us, who are originally from other places. Mhm.
Question in chat. This Japanese and I saw probably read it wrong. In the movement, we often say "Kokomo no Tami ni" for the sake of the children. What does that mean to you and your art?
Oh yeah, it's a phrase. The phrase is "kodomo no tame ni." Yeah. It means everything. I said it a couple of times. Like I'm so grateful to my family for surviving and surviving beautifully. And I don't think everyone came out of that experience in great shape. I had a grandfather who had a nervous breakdown and basically, he had an architecture degree when he went into camp, never used it because he was a broken man. I mean, it's not like everyone came out raring to go at all. But I know that so many of my ancestors were thinking about the future. So I think Kodomo no Tameni is definitely at the heart of a lot of my work, along with some of my other, guiding phrases that you saw there.
There's a comment in the chat about having gone through school in Washington State and never heard any of the history that you mentioned. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it being added to any history classes myself, but I don't know if anybody else has. In fact, even at the college, right, our administrators didn't know that history. So here's another question from chat. What is your goal from the art? Is it for people to know what happened in the past and remember those who suffered, or to have a perfect equality of all race and gender?
My goal is to honor my people and I don't think we're going to get to a perfect state in my lifetime, but I would say one of my goals in my art is to create opportunities for people to talk about this stuff, to talk about the history, to talk about the ways that our stories are so connected, and just like to be able to hash it out. Like when I was in, I think it's 8th grade, Washington State history, there was a paragraph.
Erin, you're muted again.
Oh,
Thank you. It just keeps floating around.
that was my fault. I was muting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think first step is to offer spaces to be able to ask questions and talk about these things. Yes, you in the front.
Can you tell us about what we can anticipate from you and what you're working on now and excited about?
Ooh, what am I working on now? Oh, yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to work on a piece that's like a bunch of small little altars to different people in my family. I'm working on different graphic design pieces. I kind of have my hands in a lot of different things. I'm working on a floor, like a terrazzo floor in Chinatown. Yeah, just always researching and reading and coming up with new ideas.
What kind of inspired you to start in the beginning to this movement? What sparked that? I know that for sure learning about your history and their history stuff to be really specific. so my, I'm trying to learn more about my roots. I'm from Michoacan, Mexico. And, like, I grew up not knowing a lot of the indigenous roots. And like, that's my part, and then wanting to learn more about it, that's kind of the thing that pushed me to start learning more about that, but what started to do, to start, like, doing like,
Yeah, you know, like when I was living in New York, which I loved, by the way, Brooklyn is dope. I was a graphic designer and I was just paying the bills, you know, I didn't think about making art that was not on the computer. That was enough for me. That was all I had time for. But then when I moved back here to where my family is and where my larger community is, and I had a couple opportunities. There's this really great public art boot camp that the city of Seattle puts on. If anyone in the room is interested in public art, you should look that up. And I don't know, I just realized like, this is the time to try to tell those stories. And I had never thought about being an artist or about public art, but I realized I could, you know, like some of the simplest ways to do public art are just murals and you just need a wall, you know? So you saw like my earliest work, including at Bellevue College, is very simple, just basically big black and white outputs. It's on just regular copy paper. It's big copy paper and you just need glue, you know? It's cheap and it's effective. Yeah, we know it's effective here on this campus. So,
And I don't know, I'm sure you've seen the other work, right? That there's actually artwork all across our campus now, really inspired by Never Again now. Right, so.
I haven't seen that work
yeah,
yet.
we have to just-
Is that a wrap?
Oh, hi, Erin Shigaki. Shigaki.
All right, thank you.
thank you all for your wonderful questions and a round of applause for Erin. Perfect. Closing stuff.
You want to announce the question?